edition NBA Top 30 Basketball Players. We got our man Achilles Reign with us to give us his top 30. I got my top 30. We'll see how we differ, how we agree. Let's get into it. You ready to go, Achilles?
Yep, I've got my list, and I think I'm ready to go.
All right, so let's start out at number 30. What do you got for number 30?
For number 30, it was really hard to really pinpoint exactly who I wanted to have in my top 30. I know that as I'm looking through my list, I took some guys in, put some guys in, took some guys out. I was really going back and forth. I was having a hard time. But for number 30, I'm actually going Gordon Hayward.
Yeah, Gordon Hayward. That was one of my last scratches there. I had about 3 or 4 guys I was looking to put into that list. Gordon was on there, Vucevic was on there, and I just couldn't quite put him in. My number 30 guy was Ja Morant. Just love his explosiveness, the way he's come into this league. I really think he's, even right now, one of the top probably 10-point guards in the league. And I think he makes a real big difference for that Memphis Grizzlies team. He essentially got them in the playoffs last year. If it wasn't for the bubble situation, they would have been the number 8 seed and actually gotten real playoff experience. So I just nudged Ja Morant in there off his play this last, let's say, year and a half.
I like that pick, and I think that it's a good spot for him. When I'm looking at the names, I just feel like Gordon Hayward is probably more established, and I kind of know what I'm getting from him, which is why he was able to squeak in at number 30. And the fact that he's averaging 22.3 points per game doesn't hurt. So
yeah, definitely. I could definitely see the Gordon Hayward argument there. I think I probably nudged him down a couple slots based on his last couple of years, starting with that ankle break in Boston. He just couldn't quite stay healthy, and Boston, sort of emerged with Tatum and Brown, who will probably be coming up a little later. So I probably next year, if Gordon Hayward continues to keep up his really good play in Charlotte, and maybe if Charlotte ends up making the playoffs, definitely Gordon Hayward might make my list next year if he gets back on track. All right, so what do you got for number 29?
Well, for me, this is another guy that kind of snuck in there. And at 29, I have DeMar DeRozan. I really like him at that spot. He kind of snuck in there last second for me. I wasn't too sure, but, I think his play has been solid enough that I could get him in there.
Yeah, well, guess what? Number 29 for me, also DeMar DeRozan. He's been a real good high-volume scorer for probably the last 10 years. Really was good with those Toronto Raptors teams. And then gone into San Antonio. He stayed a pretty solid scorer, but this year his efficiency, he's still able to score 20, 24 points a game, and he's passing like he's never passed before. He still can't defend all that well, but the Spurs are playing well. His efficiency on the offensive end has just been outstanding, and really, other than Kawhi Leonard, I think he's probably the best, probably mid-range jump shooter in the game right now. So that's why I put DeRozan in there and cut a couple of those guys, including someone like your Gordon Hayward that you said before.
Yeah, he makes definitely a lot of sense to have him in there. I'm a little surprised that we have him in the same spot, but It kind of worked out.
Definitely. All right, so let's move on to number 28. I have Russell Westbrook.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, you're going to be surprised because there's another guy that we have in the same spot. I also have Russell Westbrook at number 28.
All right, so double, 29, 28, the exact same. Russell Westbrook, I just snuck him in here. A lot of me wanted to sort of start to bounce him out of here, especially with the way he's played in Washington, but I think maybe a week or two ago he put up like a 40, 12, and like 18, and I just couldn't quite pull him quite out of the top 30. I still think he can put together games where really no other point guard can put together stats and carry a team like he can.
Yeah, and I agree with you 100%. I think that his play is not quite exactly where he'd like it to be or where a lot of people would like it to be, especially anybody in the Wizards franchise. But I do think that he still has the explosiveness and the ability to put up those triple-double type of games, and there's not a lot of point guards that can do that. So I felt like I just had to put him in there just out of the potential.
All right, so are we going to be the same at number 27? What do you got for 27?
It's going to be very doubtful that we're going to hit many more guys in the same spot, but at number 27, I actually have Jimmy Butler. I think that, he still has a lot left. I know that he hasn't been able to play as much lately, but I still think that he's good enough to be in the top 30.
Yeah, see, I moved Jimmy way up in my list. I really respect what he does, more postseason wise than regular season wise. He's a little hot and cold, in the regular season. Certainly, he always misses a handful of games, probably because he plays so hard. But I just think he leads winners. So I really valued winning. So I moved Jimmy Butler up there. The one I put at 27 for myself was actually a really tough choice for me to put him in there. He's not the type of player I like. He's never won in this league, and that's Karl Anthony Towns at 27. I don't think you could really fight what he does stats-wise. He scores great. He rebounds. He's probably one of the best inside-outside post players in this league right now. But that Minnesota Timberwolves franchise ever since he's gotten there has been a complete loser. It remains a loser this year. Granted, he has not been playing due to COVID, but this is one of those where I sort of bit the bullet and put a talent more than a overall wins guy in my 27 spot.
Now, when it comes to my list, you're definitely going to see there are a few players on it that I put just based off name alone, not so much statistics. But I think it's a nice little mixture on my list as far as talent versus statistics versus wins. So there's a little mixture in there, but I've got some good diversity.
Yeah. All right. Are we ready to move on to number 26?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. I went Brandon Ingram at number 26. Another one sort of like Karl Anthony Towns. Lot of talent there. He's become, much more efficient scoring-wise since he went to the New Orleans Pelicans. My only qualm with putting him at 26 was also, much like Karl Anthony Towns, he has never won in this league, and he continues not to win with these New Orleans Pelicans. And I think we'll find in our list, you probably have a Pel in there, and the reason I might have kept him off the list was because he doesn't win. But I just watch Brandon Ingram play right now, and I just see a silky smooth scoring big who actually can play make more than I think people think. His defense still has a little ways to go, but I just thought this list needed talent like Brandon Ingram. What do you have at 26?
I have to say first that I do like your Brandon Ingram, but he might come up on my list a little later on. But at number 26, I actually have Bam Adebayo.
Oh,
yes,
my.
I really like his play. I think that lately he's been playing a lot better. But still not quite enough to move him within the top 20. But I still think it's respectable enough. His game is still good enough where he had to make my list.
Yeah, this is probably where you probably will not like me too much. Bam did not make my top 30. It was a very, very tough one not to put in the top 30. Probably my toughest one other than maybe Vucevic. I really like what he does, especially all on the defensive end. But I really do think he sort of benefits from that Miami Heat team and how they run things and how they run the offense through him. I think if maybe he ended up getting drafted by the New York Knicks, we might be having Kevin Knox conversations about him instead of top 30 conversations about him. Not to take away from his talent. He's a really multi-skilled big, sort of like a poor man's Nikola Jokic, but better on the defensive end. But I couldn't quite slide him in there in the top 30. Probably my biggest one that I left off my top 30.
Well, I mean, it was definitely tough to put this list together. When you first stop and you start thinking 30 players, you're like, oh, I can get that done easily. But then as you're looking through the list of these players, it's really tough. There's a lot of really talented players right now in the NBA, so it makes it really tough to just pick out 30.
Yeah. All right, we'll move on to number 25. At number 25, where are you going?
Now, you're probably not going to be a big fan of this pick because I know you're not a huge fan of this guy, but I really love him. And I'm going with Zion Williamson.
Oh.
Let's hear it.
He, one, doesn't play defense at all. Possibly the worst power forward defensive center in the league. We're talking Trae Young levels. Now, I will give you, he is an elite scorer and power player down there. So
Who's still developing.
Who's still developing, though he's developing using less and less athleticism. I mind you to go watch the Duke highlights and then watch him have to try to bully through a bunch of NBA players he can no longer leap over. I do understand the want for him to be in the top 30. I just can't quite move it there because it might be my over expectations. I think when he came in this league, I think we all thought he was going to come in this game just rolling more Blake Griffin style. Granted, he missed that first year because of an injury, but that year he came back and played. Blake was just a marvel to watch and dominated the league, whereas I think Zion's a little more, I don't want to, he's not dominating league, he's scoring, but I just thought we'd get a little more, full player here, and I think we're getting a scorer when poor rebounding and defense.
Now, I agree. I don't think that he's quite at the level of, being like an elite type of player yet, but I think that his ceiling is still pretty high, and I think that's one of the reasons why I put him up on my list. I still think that he's a very explosive offensive player, and I think that his defense can improve. He's got the type of build to really bully people, down low. So if he can improve his defense, he'll definitely move up on my list, but for now, he's still my top 30.
Yeah. All right. So we'll go how you made this list. If the Space Jam situation happened and the aliens came down, would the Zion be one of your picks for that?
No.
No.
Oh, no.
All right. So
I think if I were making the Space Jam, reference like we did before, I think that my top 5 guys are going to be in my Space Jam team. So.
All right. So you went Zion Williamson. You went young. I went a little bit more veteran style here. He might not quite deserve inclusion, especially with some of the guys I left off. But Kyle Lowry, I just think he's been a solid point guard, and he's having another really good season. The Raptors are really, starting to make waves and work their way back into playoff contention. And a lot of that has to do with Kyle Lowry. And, it's not necessarily all the stats. Toughness, just a great leader. You watch this guy play, and you just want to play with him. And I think that's why I sort of moved him on there. And this probably about 5 or 6 year run that he's been on with the Raptors just really, really made me, didn't want me to leave him off this list.
You're going to be kind of upset at me when I tell you this, but as much as I like him and respect his game, because he is a very good player, he didn't crack my top 30.
I could see that. I think I put him on just because I think I just like him as a player. And I think also if you sort of polled the players around the league, I think they'd all say, I want to play with Kyle Lowry. So that's why I put him on my list. All right, so you ready to move on to number 24?
Yes, I am.
All right, so at 24, I went with another sort of veteran scorer, and that's Chris Middleton. I felt like he had earned the right to be on this list. He's been an efficient scorer for one of the top teams in the league for about 3 or 4 years now. So I just really, really couldn't build a list and have some of these guys who haven't won quite as many games but probably put up better stats or probably have a higher ceiling of a player. I think Chris Middleton has probably hit his ceiling. He is what he's going to be. But what he is a really, really good player. So I just had to put Chris Middleton in my list here, and I thought 24 was a pretty good slot.
I think that's actually a really good slot, but for my number 24 guy, I actually went with Donovan Mitchell. I know that you watched a lot of game on him. I haven't watched as much on him, but what I have seen, I'm really impressed, and I really like what he's doing. And just looking at the numbers, I feel like he was deserving to be in this list.
Yeah, I definitely have Donovan Mitchell. I actually have him moved up a little bit higher than you, just because if anybody's watched the Jazz the last couple of months, I think they're probably the best team in the West right now. I don't know if that means they're going to be the best team in the West in June, but right now I don't think anybody wants a part of the Utah Jazz.
Now, not to get off topic or anything, but the Jazz, really impressive, right?
Yes, I know. I think we're going to have to do another 7-on-7 and bring the Jazz back into it.
The Jazz, man. Oof.
They somehow have improved even from the time we talked about them. I think it was 2 weeks ago. I think they had gone on like a 14-1 run, and now they're on like a 22-2 run.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy what they're doing. It's definitely not something that a lot of people saw coming. So as far as like a Lakers fan is concerned, it's a little scary.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so we'll move on to number 23. Where are you going at number 23?
Number 23, this one was tough because this is one of the guys that snuck in for me. But I really like this. Sabonis. I think that he's deserving to be there. And I'm not sure if he made your list or not, or how high he was if he made your list, but I think he's deserving to be in my list.
I put Sabonis on here, definitely. He's maybe a couple spots higher. I think we're about to get to him on my list. Right now, he's sort of Jokic light right now. He's pretty much Jokic in the East. The way he can pass, the way he just controls game. He's one of those true sort of old school centers too, where he can put you on the block and put you in that torture chamber. And
I love that.
I know. I love it too. It's good to see those guys out. Now he started to also stretch his game out a little bit, but when those other teams go small and they put that small on him, he puts them down there in that torture chamber. Also just a great rebounder. Love that Pacers team and really like the Sabonis inclusion. I went with Drew Holiday here. Another Bucks, but he hasn't been playing on the Bucks. I just feel like his defense probably puts him in this list here. I think offensively it's probably a little bit more hit and miss, but I've heard Dame Lillard talk about him. I heard Steph Curry talk about him. And everything I ever hear about them is the hardest guy they have to play against is Drew Holiday. And when I hear that from those elite guys that they don't want to go up against Drew, I just feel like that deserves inclusion into this top 30 list. Now, we'll see how he does with the Bucks here and how far he can take the Bucks. If it's another sort of early exit for him, he might sort of fall out of that list because I'm big on player success and wins. And while those Pelican teams were solid teams, they didn't win a ton. They only made the second round of the playoffs once with somebody who's, I think, probably really far up both our list and Anthony Davis. And Drew Holiday was part of those teams. And those teams just never could really seem to get over the hump or get into the playoffs consistently, mostly because of injuries, but the two. But really, I just thought Drew Holiday and his defense deserved inclusion in this list.
That's a really good pick.
All right, we'll move on to number 22. Where are you going, 22?
Number 22, I bring in a player that we've talked about before, a guy who's really improved, especially this season. His game seems to really stepped up, and that's Julius Randle.
All right, Julius Randle. Well, Julius didn't quite make my list. I think if we can put this full season together like he's doing right now, I think he might climb up in there, but I just think it probably hasn't been enough, Julius Randle. I've seen it in spurts. If you ask me on a given day and I see it on the right day, I'd tell you Julius Randle, probably a definite top 30 player. But then I can remember games back when he played with your Lakers where I'd be like, yeah, that guy's an immature jerk. I can remember games with said Pelicans where I could say the same thing. And I think last year, I remember games with the New York Knicks where it's possible I don't think he passed the ball one time the whole game. So that's why I sort of didn't quite have him. He was one of those cuts, probably not the last cut. It was probably the list before the last cut, where I just didn't think the body of work was quite there with Julius. But if he keeps it up like he's been doing this year, definitely going to probably move him in here. This must be my veteran part of the list here. I think we both know he's not my favorite, but I didn't think I could build a top 30 list without him in it, and that was Chris Paul. He's leading this Phoenix Suns team to some wins. The stats seem to be dropping off a little bit, but I don't think you can deny the way he plays and the way he sort of gets the best of him. I don't think he's always been the best teammate, but he certainly makes basketball teams go and win, at least in the regular season. I don't know if we want to touch his playoff record, but regular season wins, I don't think you can do probably much better than Chris Paul running your team.
You know, it's kind of crazy. I know statistically he's still putting up pretty good numbers, not quite to the Chris Paul level that we're all expecting, but he's still putting up decent numbers. Somehow he didn't make it into my list.
I can see that. I can definitely see that because I think I was going back and forth with it because I do definitely think he's dropped off. But I just, the way the Phoenix Suns have played this year and they continue to win, even with the sort of lighter stats than he's had in the past, I just figured Chris Paul, I think you'd still probably take him as your point guard, so I couldn't leave him out.
Now, you know, you may notice that there's a little bit of bias on my list. There might be some players that either former players or current players with the Lakers that, you know, maybe kind of snuck in there. And there might be some players that maybe played against my Lakers that quite didn't, you know, get the respect that they deserve. But Chris Paul, I think that at least he should make my honorable mentions.
You say biased, and I have Chris Paul at mine, and I think I've probably been the number one person to trash him for the last 12 years about how he never wins in the playoffs. All right, we'll move on from number 22 to number 21. Where are you going at 21?
Number 21, that's actually one of the players that you mentioned before. I have him a little bit higher, and that's Brandon Ingram. And it's for all the same reasons that you think. I just like him a little bit more. Maybe that bias is showing.
Yeah, maybe so. But no, Brandon's been great since he's been traded to the New Orleans Pelicans. I really like that. We're out of my veteran range, and we're moving back into my least favorite category. I figure you probably have him a little higher. I probably will get a lot of slack for this, but Bradley Beal is my 21, yeah. He's becoming the Mitch Richmond of this era. Lot of points scored, not very many wins. And it's too bad the Washington Wizards already have him. They can't make a trade for him when he's 35 years old and no longer any good, and yet still paying him a lot of money. But Bradley, I really respect his game. I just I couldn't in good conscience move him sort of out of the top 20 with just the team success as he has. Even with John Wall, the team success just wasn't there. It's spotty wins, spotty playoff resume. I know he's been amazing this year, but it hits a little too much of that sort of good stats, bad team kind of guy. But he's putting up really, really good stats.
Yeah, he's putting up really good numbers. His point per game average right now is ridiculous. He's one of the top scorers in the league. So, but I understand why you had to put him there. I do.
All right, we'll go on to number 20. And I have Ben Simmons at number 20. And actually, I really sort of wanted to make him move up higher. I love Ben Simmons. I love his game. I know people can't get over the fact that, one, he can't shoot, and one, he's not all that much of a scorer other than in transition. But I think these sort of the way he plays defense, the way he can guard ones to fives, I think he really covers sort of that 76ers team and helps them out. And I think the way he pushes the pace in games is just, it's LeBron like early LeBron, not, now LeBron who essentially crawls the ball up the court. But
still winning.
Yeah.
He's still winning.
But if we go to 2004 LeBron when he blast off and take up, I do see a lot of Ben Simmons in there. I don't know how great that fit is with Embiid. I love Embiid too, but his pace wants to be slow. Ben's wants to be fast. Embiid needs a shooter. Ben's not really a shooter. I think that counterbalances. Now, they found ways to win games, and a lot of that is on the defensive end, because when you played Embiid and Simmons on the defensive end, it definitely... But I just think Ben Simmons is so unique. The scoring thing doesn't bother me, because I think you can find scoring from just numerous places out there, and I think the stuff that Ben Simmons gets you really puts him in my list. I wanted to move him higher, but the guys I have probably 19 and below, I didn't think he probably was worth that jump.
See, and for me, I actually put my list together not so much based off of wins, but a lot of it's based off like individual performances and things like that. I do include wins in there because I do think it's important, but I'm more of a casual fan when it comes to the NBA, whereas you are more of a hardcore, deep analytic type of fan. But
I do have a lot of analytical stats on Simmons. I know. We'd like to get into it.
I really was hoping that you were going to bring those up because I don't have any stats ready for you. But actually, for number, what were we, 20?
We are at 20.
Number 20, I actually went with Jason Tatum. I think that he is playing really well. I think that he's played really well. I think that he's put together a pretty good resume so far. And I feel like he was deserving to make it into the top 20, so that's the reason why I have him there.
Yeah, I like your Jason Tatum pick. I moved him up a little bit higher than you just because really impressed with the way he scored and the way that Celtics team, other than a weird Kyrie year in there where sabotage was the theme of the year. But I just love the way Brown and Tatum play together, but Tatum has been very impressive scoring-wise, and they've won games. So that's why I sort of moved Tatum up ahead of Beal, because both scores, both really efficient scores, but the Celtics have gotten wins. Now, some can argue that the Celtics have a much more talented team than anything Bradley Beal's played with, but wins are wins. So we'll move on to number 19, and we already went over this guy. I said I had him up a couple spots ahead of yours. Domantas Sabonis, just love the way he plays, and love his rebounding, love his post play, and his passing this year has just been sensational. So I'll let you take number 19.
I actually like your Sabonis pick at 19. I wish I could have moved them higher. There were just other players that I liked a little bit more than him. But for my number 19 pick, I actually have Paul George. I know that, he's kind of been in and out so far this season, but I'm looking at the entire, work as a measure of factoring in, the whole.
Yes.
And I think that he's deserving to be in the top 20. He's been, at some point, at least an elite player. At some point, he was considered one of the top prospects when it came to free agency. I think that he could still play really good ball. I think that he just needs to stay healthy and remain, active for the whole season, and we'll definitely see a climb in his numbers. But his numbers still are pretty good. So that's one reason he made into my top 20.
Yeah, I have him a handful of spots higher than you. We can take the shots playoff-wise. Certainly, probably the last 5-6 years. I think people are forgetting a little bit of his playoff performance for those Pacers teams where he might not necessarily have been the number one guy, but he made his name guarding LeBron James on those Heat teams. I think people sort of forget that, and he's gotten that bad stigma, rightfully so. If you've watched some of these playoff games the last couple years, but I don't think anybody can say his regular season play has been, subpar. And also I think people forget the way he defends. He will defend any and all positions, and he will, unlike sort of Kawhi, who's probably a better overall defender, but he's been a little bit more picky about when he's going to go full bore defense. And I really like that Paul George, if you tell him a defensive assignment from the start of the game, he'll pretty much pick it up that full game. He hasn't been quite as picky, and I think that's also sort of factored a little bit into his injury troubles that he's had, and maybe being a little bit worn down in the playoffs, which leads to some of those really, really poor performances.
I really like that pick.
All right, we'll move on to number 18. So what do you have for 18?
Okay, now this guy, I was debating whether he would sneak into the top 20 or not, but I actually have McCollum at number 18. I feel like that was a good spot for him. It's still top 20, but still not super high. I still think that there's some improvement he could do, but he's having a really good season. I felt like he was deserving.
Well, this one I don't know how we pulled off, because C.J. McCollum is my number 18 as well. I can get how we can get maybe the 30s and maybe some of the top 5s, but to hit a random teen with the exact same guy is really remarkable. But C.J. McCollum, just him and Lillard together make a great tandem, and his efficiency at scoring has just grown and grown and grown. And before he sort of freakishly broke his foot on a dunk this year, he was playing the best basketball that I had ever seen him play. He really had jumped that three-point percentage, and he was just becoming an unstoppable scorer. And just really love the way he plays. He comes out, grinds every day. Probably not the best defender, but him and Dame together have led that Portland team to numerous wins and Eastern Conference Finals. I don't think you could ask much more of that. And really, I think if you probably take away Kevin Durant from going to those Golden State teams, we might at least have had a little bit of a different shakeout there in the West a couple times. I don't know for sure, but you're seeing the Warriors now get a little banged up. So I think if Kevin Durant hadn't gone there, it could have been somebody like the Blazers popping up like that Mavs team did in 2011. But I still think there's a chance there that Blazers teams will do good. Really well sometime in the future here if they can keep them together. But really like C.J. McCollum, just a really great scorer and player overall.
Now, not to get off topic again, but I have a question for you. Is there a more explosive duo, not a trio, a duo, than McCollum and Lillard?
In the league right now? I don't think so, unless I guess you could maybe toss in, it's a little bit different stylistic-wise, but Jokic and Murray, if Murray gets going. But Certainly not in the regular season. I don't think we've seen enough consistent Murray. I think we've seen plenty of consistent Jokic, but I don't think we've seen enough consistent Murray probably. So I definitely think those two, unless you wanted to throw in your Gordon and LaMelo ball.
I'm not quite ready to jump on that boat yet, but okay.
Yeah, no, I think it's probably the two best two-guard tandem I've seen in a really, really long time.
Very explosive.
Yeah, maybe since like Golden State Warriors, early '90s days with like Run TMC, where Hardaway and Mitch Richmond, the above spoken when he was on a good team, was there. But let's move on to number 17. Where are you going at 17?
At 17, I've got maybe a bit of a surprise.
I think you know we're going to hammer this one.
I've got Zach LaVine at number 17.
All right. Well, I don't even know if I have to hammer it. I think we could go through my whole list of good stats, bad team guy. Literally has never won anything when he was at Minnesota. And I think we both know how I feel about the selfish shooting chuckers.
Listen, all I have to say is that if you're averaging above 28 points per game, you're probably safe to make my list. That's all I'm going to say.
I know. A very good scorer. I did find it amusing when Bradley Beal tweeted about good stats, bad team guy when they were in their little tiff. And I was like, well, what the hell are you?
I know. That's exactly what I was thinking.
But nonetheless, the numbers are there. I will give you that. And the numbers have been there for a handful of years. I just couldn't, probably in good conscience, put him on there with just the way the Bulls have been for the last handful of seasons, and Minnesota, which I don't know if you blame him or just Minnesota in general for being a crappy franchise because they've ruined a lot of players, but just couldn't quite make him into that list because just not enough wins and team overall success for me, despite the really, really high ability to score. I would think it would be interesting if you could get him onto a contender and not necessarily make him a starter, but one of those six-mans who could come off the bench. I mean a high-level contender, not low-level contender, but a high-level contender and turn him into a six-man like that. He could come off the bench and put up 17, 24 points in, 25, 30 minutes. I do think there will be one day a spot where Zach LaVine finds success in this league.
I hope so, because he's a very explosive scorer.
Yes, definitely. All right, so at 17, I had the aforementioned Donovan Mitchell. I told you I moved him up a handful of spots. Really, really like this player. Works hard on the defensive end. The Jazz were running their offense basically through him since he was a rookie and didn't even know what he was doing. There's a mini sort of poor man's Woolworth version of Dwayne Wade in this guy. He's not quite at that level.
Okay.
It might be a tail end of the Miami Heat Dwayne Wade than, mid-2000s Dwayne Wade, who possibly was one of the best shooting guards of all time.
I was going to say, that's a huge compliment to play.
But I do see it in there. I don't think he's quite at that level, but I do really like that the Jazz basically run their offense through him, and he's gotten the other thing I like. He's gotten more and more efficient, jump shooting wise, 3-point shooting wise. He's not quite as crazy drives to the basket. He's learning to pass and play, and I do think that has a little bit led to the Utah Jazz success, where he's learned to play make and get those other 3-point shooters involved. And right now, basically anyone they pass to on that Jazz team is draining threes. So I don't know if that's his playmaking or just the Jazz being very, very hot right now. All right, let's move on to number 16. You already went over this guy. I have Jason Tatum at 16. I talked about how I really just like this guy scoring and had him a couple spots ahead of you. Where are you going at 16?
At 16, a guy that you already mentioned. I have him a little bit higher than you do, well, a lot higher than you do. That's Karl Anthony Towns. And I just feel like everything
I should combine your Zach LaVine, Karl Anthony Towns. Well, I can't combine them. They already tried to combine them in Minnesota.
Listen, we've talked about this, and you're obviously going to put a lot more emphasis on wins than I am. I just feel that he's a really good player who still has so much more room for growth. I feel that his ceiling is really high, and as good as he is and has been, I feel like he could still be better, which is one of the reasons why I have him so high.
Yeah, I understand your point, and really this is one of those situations where you wish he would have been drafted by a Portland or a Golden State or a San Antonio.
He would make such a difference.
Yes, I know. I do really, I understand putting him this high because if you just watch him play, stats aside, he is an elite player, one of the, probably, if you really want to watch him play, 10 best players in this league. Wins haven't come. I think being in that franchise and just being on a perennial bottom feeder team with very, very poor management. I don't think I could put enough berries in the poor management category there, but I do see it. I just, if they could get him out of there and onto him to the Miami Heat, I think we'd get a much different player and probably one who moves up really, really high in my list. All right, so at number 15, I went with Jason Tatum's counterpart, Jaylen Brown. And some people might be shocked that I put him ahead of Jason Tatum, but this guy's overall game, it does remind me a little bit of very young Paul George. The way he's able to guard numerous positions, just unrelenting energy on that defensive side of the ball, and he's learned how to really pick up his scoring. His playmaking isn't to an elite level, but it has much, much improved from when he was a rookie. And I just like the way he works. He's gotten so good at scoring the ball these days, and that defense was always there. Just really, really like Jaylen Brown, and I would love to have him on any team. He's just the kind of player that I love.
He didn't make my list, unfortunately.
Yes, I know. We're getting you sent numerous pages of analytical stats that
sure.
you will be thumbing through for the next 2 weeks.
I'm sure that's going to be my homework for the next couple of weeks, but I just felt like as good as he has been, I felt like there still has to be a little more improvement for him to crack that list. But I still respect the fact you put him there.
Yeah, and yet you don't. The scoring jump from the previous years when he was mostly probably a 17 to barely a 20-point-a-game score to where he's scoring about 26 this year. You don't know if that's an outlier and he'll come back, to earth in the next year or two, or if it keeps growing. So I can understand where you're sitting there. I've watched him since he was that freshman year at Cal when I saw him there and I was like, I don't even think this guy's a guy that's going to make the league, and they have him going like in the top 5. And watching him grow from there and turn into what he's become, it's just been really, really, and one hell of a teammate as well. So that might have gave him that little extra boost in mine. All right, so where are you going for number 15?
Number 15 was a little tough for me. It's one of those guys that I'm not a huge fan of, but I still respect his game, so I had to put him on my list. That's Kyrie Irving.
You're challenging me with these last 3. You possibly have somehow managed to group 3 of my least favorite players in the league.
I did it on purpose.
In Levine, Towns, and Irving. Now, while I do not have Kyrie Irving in my list, there is a reason. Because
Let's hear it.
For 2 weeks, he might be in the top 5 of someone's list. And then for the next month, because he had a hangnail, he might not even be playing. So I just couldn't very well put him in here because I don't even know how he views himself as a basketball player. If everything is not just perfectly kosher, it seems to go off the wall. And it's possible also there's bias. As much as you could talk me into Zach LaVine and Karl Anthony Towns, I don't think there's anything you can do to talk me into Kyrie Irving.
No, I completely understand, your disdain for him. And like I said, I'm not a huge fan. I think that as a player, he's got a lot of game and he's really good. As a person, that's a different story. That's a different show. But I still felt that his game was good enough to warrant him to be on the list.
Should I have sent you the article that broke today where he declared that James Harden is the point guard now and he's the 2 guard?
Oh, no. Now, is there some way we could just pause the show so I can go read this?
So apparently he's the 2 guard. James Harden is running the point guard spot. Now the Nets will be perfectly fine. They have that sorted out.
Interesting. That's what was missing, right? They just didn't know what their roles were. Now they know.
I'm not sure either can guard point guards or shooting guards, which might lead to more of the issue. All right, we'll move on from your 3 picks of death here. And move on to number 14. And that's where I have Paul George at number 14, just under the top 15. So we already mentioned how much I like Paul George's defensive effort and his ability to score. We've also talked about how playoff-wise, probably the reason why he didn't move into my top 10, because I do think throughout the regular season he's shown he's easily a top 10 player in this league. But you can't ignore those playoff performances, and probably him declaring himself playoff P and whining probably bumped him down a little bit on my list as well. Not quite into Kyrie total banishment from the list, but definitely off the list.
Let's see, 14. I have a guy on here that you don't have on your list, and I tried to figure it out. Now, I don't know if
I think I did mention I wanted him on the list, him or his
yes,
guys.
in all fairness, you did say that it's an honorable mention for you. But I love big guys, man. To me, like I said, I'm more of a casual fan, and with that, I tend to be more old school in the way that I like my basketball. And I like big guys. Big guys are a good, solid foundation to build a team upon. So I've got Vucevic on there. I think that he's a solid player. You know what you're going to get from him. He's not going to be super flashy, but you know what you're going to get from him. He's consistent in, day out. He's always going to do what he's got to do. He's going to take care of business. So I feel like he's one of those players that you have to put on your list. He's good enough to make a bad team at least somewhat relevant.
Yeah, I totally get that, and I actually love Vooch, and it really stung me. I think that one was the one that stung me the most, not putting him in my top 30, because I do actually think he's probably a top 30 player. That's where somebody like, Chris Paul, I probably should have pulled off, maybe Drew Holiday, and put Vooch in there. I think what hurts Vooch, and the Orlando Magic, he's just in a wasteland there, perennial 8th seed who gets swept out of the playoffs every year. And, we speak about Karl Anthony Towns living in purgatory up in Minnesota. Vooch just seems to live in purgatory in Orlando, who can't get better, are managing to get worse, however. So maybe he somehow gets out of that situation and we get to see, Vooch playing in some meaningful games at some point before his career is over. But I totally get it, and that one really hurt me not having it in my list. All right, we'll move on to number 13, and that's where I have Jimmy Butler. And just love Jimmy, and I felt like he was a top 15 guy. He might not be a top 15 guy necessarily all the time in the regular season. This is probably the reverse of Paul George, where, sticky situations come up, I want Jimmy Butler. Regular season, breezy games versus the Oklahoma City Thunder or the Phoenix Suns, I probably want Paul George. But when things get tough and you really need somebody to have you win the game, I want Jimmy Butler, and that's why I moved him into my top 15 there.
I like the fact you put him in there. I know that I have him lower, but I still think he's really good. I just think that with me, and a lot of it had to do with the fact that he just hasn't quite gotten over the hump. And I know that I don't put a lot of emphasis on winning, but I respect the guy. I respect his game. I just think that he deserves to be on this list, just not that high.
Yeah, I get it. So where are you going for number 13?
Number 13, this is strictly just based off statistics. I've got Bradley Beal on there. We talked about it a little earlier when you brought him up on your list.
You gave me some fresh air with Vooch, and then you're back into your bad stats, Listen, good stats, bad team, guys.
He's putting up some sick numbers, man. His numbers are like out of he's having a really good season, and if he keeps this up, he's definitely going to be at least in the talk for one of those offensive player of the years type of awards.
Yes, if you could get the team some more wins, that would also help a couple bets I have on the year as well. The gamble that the Washington Wizards would be a very good basketball team is sort of backfiring right now. All right, so we'll move off the number 13 and go to number 12. And this is where I have Rudy Gobert. Not a scorer, but love Rudy. And the Jazz, while they've built their offense around Donovan Mitchell, ever since Rudy Gobert has gotten there, the Jazz have been one of the best defensive teams in the league, and it's all because of Rudy, because they can funnel everything down there. Just we'll go a little analytical, not too much, but one of the best shot contesters in the league. Teams just cannot shoot an effective field goal percentage when they get in that paint with Rudy down there. So just love Rudy Gobert. Love the success he's brought the Jazz. And just think when you have that type of defensive force, you can build yourself a good team and find ways to hit offense. The Jazz did that early, and now they seem to have that perfect mix of offense and defense.
You know, I really like Rudy. I think that he's a really solid player. Now, when he first came into the league, I remember watching him thinking, like, who is this lanky guy and what is he going to do in the league? He's going to get pushed around. Well, I was completely wrong. This guy is a great defender. He gets in people's noses and he grinds away. I really like his play. Now, he didn't make my list. I will say that, okay? And
I can think of about 3 or 4 that we just went over that should be out of here.
Listen, you want to bash me for it? I well deserved, okay? Because he probably deserves to be on the list, but he's not on my list, okay? It's very, very unfortunate. But on my list at number 12, I actually went with the other duo we talked about in Portland. That's Damian Lillard. One of the most explosive offensive players. He does okay on defense. I think he can improve defensively, but his offense can't be denied. He can shoot from just about anywhere. I mean, I've seen him take shots from half court, and he's so confident. That confidence sometimes it's a bit of a derailment for his overall success. But I still think that his confidence is one of the reasons why he's such a good player. He can feel like he can shoot just about anywhere.
Yeah, I have Dame a couple spots higher than you. Just love Dame. Probably one of the top 3-point guards in this league. Just a ridiculously gifted scorer. And probably the only reason that keeps me from moving him from where I have him on my list into like a top 5 guy is the defensive liabilities that present those teams. But you can't deny what Dame brings to that Portland Trail Blazers team with leadership, with scoring ability, and just wins overall. That Portland team has been really, really functional with Damian Lillard taking control of the reins there. All right, so we're at number 11, and I'm going with the big man here, Joel Embiid. So at number 11, Joel Embiid. Finally really looks like he's been in shape this year, playing really good basketball, very sort of reminiscent of old school Patrick Ewing hitting that little baby fadeaway jumper down there in the post. The previous season, he probably hasn't been in shape, but still managed to be a really, really dominant force and helping the Sixers sort of move out of the process and into a legit contender. So Joel Embiid, number 11 on my list.
I like that pick. I have him on my list. I won't say quite where just yet, but to me, I love the big guys, and he's improved this game so much more. I think that this is going to be a good season for him, especially if he continues playing that way. So I really like that pick there. But at number 11, I went with someone a bit smaller than Joel. I went with James Harden at number 11.
Maybe the same size, though, at this point.
Maybe. They probably weigh the same. But no, I went with James Harden. That big trade that happened earlier on this season with him going over to the Nets, I think that was probably best thing that could happen for him. He tried his best in Houston, but he couldn't quite, deliver anything. But overall, he's still a really good player, probably one of the better scorers, definitely MVP caliber. He probably drops off a little bit, though, especially now that he's got more talents around him. Not as much as needed from him, although he's still putting up pretty good numbers.
Yeah, I have James a couple spots up ahead of you, and James, probably the most efficient scorer maybe the NBA has ever seen, the way he threes, layups, free throws, and can basically get to the basket whenever he wants, can get that 3 off whenever he wants. Play style probably leaves a little bit to be desired, especially if you happen to be a teammate and have to watch him dribble the ball for 23 seconds and either shoot a layup or chuck a hit away 3. But you probably can't argue too much with the result. His teams, despite his playoff woes, have had really good success since he's been with the Rockets. They were very successful when he was with the Thunder, and you had Durant, Westbrook, him, and Ibaka even getting to a finals. I think people tend to forget that team made a finals. Now, they were up against a very, very talented Heat team, but I do think people tend to forget that Harden and those Thunder teams made the finals. So he has had playoff success. It just hasn't come with the way those Rockets teams was built. But I don't think anyone has really been a more efficient scorer in the league, certainly in the last 15 to 20 years than James Harden. All right, so we're going into our top 10. Are you ready to get into our top 10?
This is where it gets a little sketchy.
Yes, it does. All right. Damian Lillard, for me, is my number 10 guy. We talked about him when he was on your list. I think the only thing that I said didn't quite move him up into that top 5, top 8 status was he's just a little bit too much of a defensive liability. And I really think that hurts the Blazers at times, especially when somebody like Nurkic is out like he is now, or Collins, who's seemingly been out for the last 3 years. But you can't argue with anything Dame does, and I'd have him on my team any time.
Yeah, I agree with you. With the defensive liability, especially at that point guard position, you have the general, the floor general, so it's really important to play some sort of defense, and I think that's probably where he's lacking. But I really like him to be in your top 10. I think that it's a really good pick there. For my top 10, first guy there, I'm actually going with Trae Young. I know that you're not quite as high on him as I am, but I really like Trae Young.
I think this is just a pick to make me angry.
It might be. I might have came into this like, how can I anger him today? But no.
Say Kyrie Irving and Trae Young in the same sentence.
No, I really like his game. I think it's becoming a little more evident that he's a really, really good player. I know that you mentioned before that he's probably not the best teammate, but I think as far as like individual performances go, I think that he's really good.
Yeah, I understand, and the fact
he's
that
averaging almost a double-double.
Yes, I know.
What is he at, like 9.6 assists per game,
yes,
and then 20?
You cannot argue with the stats. I will put up arguments in different ways. He probably should be in my top 30 list, though he is absolutely the worst defender in the NBA. I can bring you those statistics and show you that.
No, please don't. You're going to make my top 10 pick look.
Offensively, I don't think you can argue with him, though I will say I think he's a version of James Harden, just not quite as good as James Harden. I think he's probably a little less efficient than James Harden. He can't get to the basket as well. I don't think he's as good a passer. I think, he gets those assists because literally he has the ball in his hands the whole time, and then, bam, pass to a three-point shooter. They hit it. He gets an assist for that. He is a very, very highly skilled offensive player. I will say that his game just, it bothers me. And it probably bothers me more than Kyrie Irving because I can see the brilliance in Kyrie Irving's game. I don't always see the brilliance in Trae Young's game. I see it for Trae Young. I don't see it for the Atlanta Hawks.
That's a fair point.
All right, so we're out of the top 10, and we're going in to the top 10. So number 9, and this is where I have James Harden on my list. Right there at number 9, I already told you all about him and his efficiency as a scorer. We could probably hammer that defense a little bit. There are at times, at least maybe once every 30 games or so, there's a little effort there on defense. Now, those 29 before it, he probably is staring at somebody backdoor cutting him and dunking. But when you're scoring 35 points a game that efficiently, you probably can't argue about it too much. And I will say he's been not quite the same player with the Nets. He's been much more efficient passing the ball, scoring, in that mid-20s range instead of forcing up, a bunch of shots with, at 35 a game. So I have liked his game with the Nets. Not defensively necessarily, but that might be just a Nets overall team issue than just a James Harden issue. All right, where are you at number 9?
Well, now that we're in our top 10, inside the top 10, this is where you're going to start seeing a little more of the bigger guys. There's still a couple small guys there, but this is where the big guys lie in my list. And at number 9, I'm going with Lakers' own Anthony Davis. Obviously, one of the best players in the league, one of the better big men in the league. He's really versatile. He can do just about anything on both sides of the ball. He can play offense, can play defense. So that's one of the reasons why he's on my list. And the fact that he's a Laker doesn't hurt.
Yeah, I'm really stunned by this because guess what? I have Anthony Davis way, way up my list.
Which doesn't surprise me.
I just love Anthony Davis. That versatility on defense. We spoke about Gobert and how his defense affects games. Anthony Davis's defense affects games even more because it's not just the paint defense. you can switch with him on picks, and he can guard points. You can switch with him, and he can guard guards. It's just ridiculous what he can do. You could probably hammer it a little bit on offense. I've always thought it's a little, hit and miss on offense there. But when you have LeBron James, you can be hit or miss on offense because LeBron can pretty much do whatever he wants. So that's just a perfect fit there. When Anthony Davis is flowing and that little fadeaway jumper is hitting, you ride him. And when it's just one of those nights where you seem to have to shove the ball into him and make him shoot, you have LeBron James there to save you.
I love Davis, especially the fact that he's a Laker makes me love him even more. But I do wish he was more aggressive.
Yes,
if he was more aggressive, he'd definitely move up on my list because he's got the talent, he's got the mental IQ that he knows what he's doing. He's just not as assertive sometimes, and I wish that he was more assertive. He'd definitely crack my top 3 at that point.
Well, I think this is where being on, we talked about like Karl Anthony Towns and other guys not being on the right teams. I think this is where it moves him, like when he was on the Pelicans. I'd probably have him as a 10 to 15 range guy instead of where I have him on my list, which is in the top 5, because he wasn't that aggressive offensive force, and I think those Pelicans teams struggled because of it, because really you had him and Holiday, both really great teammates, guys you'd love to play with, but neither are necessarily where you'd go like James Harden, who will force up 30 shots no matter what, and you literally, I don't know what you'd have to do to get Anthony Davis to shoot 30 shots in a game.
I don't think he would.
It's possible his whole Kentucky career, he probably didn't combine for 30 shots in a game. So this is where that situation moves him in, because he doesn't have to be that over-aggressive guy. There are plenty of guys on that Lakers team who can score points. There are plenty of guys who can run the offense on that Lakers team. He can just be Anthony Davis and do Anthony Davis things, and that's why I have him where I have him here. All right, so we're off number 9, and we're at number 8. And I think this was probably the biggest upset of the thing. I have Luka Doncic at number 8. I believe you probably have him a little higher than I do.
A little
and
bit.
I think the fact that I have Luka Doncic at 8 and you have him higher than me.
And you love him.
I know. Really is something. I probably love him too much. It's probably this season that made me drop him down a little bit. The Mavs just haven't been quite as successful as I thought they were going to be.
As a lot of us thought
Yes.
that they were going to be.
Now, there are factors there. Mostly that there was a 2.5 week where they were missing 5-6 of their players from COVID.
I'm sure that would hurt.
And, that's where, you're replacing 5 or 6 guys in the NBA, especially out west. You just, you can't afford to miss that many guys. And that's probably due to their success also with Porzingis out for the first month of the season with a knee injury, and then he was a little slow to get back. He's looked much better.
He's looked really good lately.
Yeah, he's looked much better since we had our conversation about him. So maybe we should do that every couple of weeks to make sure this Mavs team gets the success I want.
Maybe he's a listener. Maybe he's one of those guys that tunes in to hear what other people have to say about him, and he's like, okay. He's like, I'm about to show these guys.
I will say, though, it probably speaks to something that we had no other Mav in our top 30. We did not have Porzingis in there. Now I
didn't even think about
that.
Yeah,
I wrote Tim Hardaway Jr. down, but that was as the very
Yes.
that was the initial list. So that probably speaks to something about Doncic. Is
Yes.
really there might not even be another top 30 guy on his roster now. If Porzingis is 100% fully healthy and you could get 82 games out of him, he probably moves into this top 30, but he hasn't proven that. So maybe that's why I'm a little more down on Doncic. I don't think I could make up anything where I'm complaining about his game, though he can score, he can pass, he can rebound. His defense is a little shady, but he's got a body where he can body guys. So nothing to complain about, really, Doncic, other than the team's success hasn't gone quite where I thought it would this year.
Well, at number 8, I actually went with one of your old favorites. You love this guy, Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi Leonard, who's probably one of the better defensive players in the league. He, like you said, he doesn't always show up defensively and give you full effort, but when he does, he's a dangerous defensive player. And his offensive game is also, he's no slouch when it comes to the offense. Obviously, his team depends on him a lot for his success. And he's one of the best players in the league, which is why he's in my top 10.
Yeah, I didn't move him quite down as far as you. I still have him ranked pretty high, but I've seen a little bit. I mean, it's very slight because when Kawhi wants to go, he goes.
Yeah.
And you can tell he's, if not the best player in the game, one of the best players in the game. And it's certainly sometimes when he's there, he's probably the best player in the game. But I just seen he needs rest here. He's not. I mean, I wish people would go back and watch those Spurs tapes where, I mean, he literally would be on a guy from the start of the game to the end of the game. And it wouldn't be, the worst guy. It'd be the best guy. I mean, those finals games where he played LeBron James or played Kevin Durant, he was in those guys' chests for all 48 minutes of the game.
I mean, I remember even in the regular season, as a Laker fan, you got to watch a lot of these Spurs-Lakers games back home. And I remember watching him, and the guy was relentless. He was just nonstop, especially in his early days. You could just tell he was going to be a superstar.
Yeah. I do think the scoring, he's sort of reached that LeBron James level where he doesn't even have to try to get like 25 points. He could be like half asleep during the game. He's just so efficient and knows where he wants to be on the court that it's just there, 25 a night, and then, it might be an explosive night where he gets 35 or 40.
Oh, yeah, very effortless.
Yes, but the reason I moved him down, not quite as far as you, was I just think that defensive energy has dropped a little, which is also, sort of, he's been banged up for a handful of years now. But I have at number 7, one of your favorites, probably one of my favorites as
probably
well.
one of your favorites.
Steph Curry at number 7. I couldn't quite crack him in the top 5, though this last couple of weeks he probably was pushing hard. The guys I have above him, though, I just think are the elite of the elite. And while I think Curry is the elite of the elite, these Warrior teams aren't winning now. A lot of that, there's no Clay, and the offense is basically give Curry the ball, and that's all they are. The way Draymond has dropped off, not necessarily offensive game-wise, but he doesn't score anymore. He no longer takes three-point shots, and when he does, he doesn't make them. He's basically just a facilitator down there. If you're asking Andrew Wiggins to, try to shelter that scoring load, and he has, but it's just not
enough.
It's not enough, and I mean, honestly, we just talked about it with Luka Doncic.
Yeah.
No other Warrior as a top 30 player, so Curry's out there alone. But so that's why I probably had him 7. Also last year, he only played, like 5 games. Now some of that was strategic, so they could have the James Wiseman pick, and he probably could, but the team was already done for the year, and so not quite my top 5, but he certainly could be.
Now on that same spot, number 7, I actually have a former teammate of Steph Curry's, and that's Kevin Durant. I still think that he's probably still one of the best scorers in the league. A lot of people would argue he's probably one of the best players in the league, which, it's hard to argue, against that. But I think that the numbers are going to drop off slightly. I know the numbers look really good right now, but I think the fact that now, since you said Kyrie Irving, now they all know their roles and they're all defined now. I think his scoring might drop a little bit more now since we know who the 2 guard and the 1 guard are. So, no, I still think that Kevin Durant, though, spectacular player and still within the top 10. So
my roles would be hand Kevin Durant the ball and screw the other 2 guys.
Yes, that's what I would do. I mean, regardless of the injury history that he has, he's one of the most dynamic scorers. He's super long. He's super agile, very fast, very quick. But he can still play defense and everything. So top 10, nothing to laugh about. But I'd like to have him higher. I just think that I'd like to see a little bit more this season.
Yeah, I moved Kevin sort of probably not in his rightful place before he blew out his Achilles, because that was probably a very, very good argument for number 1 at that point in time. But the way he's playing this year really is remarkable. The way he's bounced back from Achilles surgery is probably the best I've ever seen anybody who bounced back from Achilles surgery.
Definitely.
Certainly, basketball player-wise, that's usually just a death knell. I mean, Wesley Matthews, who's had a long career and played well since he blew out his Achilles. Certainly is no longer the player he was with the Portland Trailblazers before he had that Achilles, and there are numerous others. I mean, we could get into Kobe Bryant, but he was like 37, 38 at that time. I don't know if that's a great argument, but he was scoring about 30 a game. They weren't winning, but it dropped quick once that Achilles popped, and the way Kevin Durant has bounced back has just been amazing. All right, so we're on to number 6. And I think we have some bigs here at number 6.
Yeah,
Where are you going?
We should have some bigs. You know me, I love the bigs. Number 6, you talked about him a little bit earlier, but I have him a little bit higher than you do. I have a Joel Embiid here. I feel like he is definitely the reason why his team is having the type of success that they're having. And if it wasn't for his type of play, both offense and defense, they wouldn't be anywhere where they're at right now.
Yeah, I think this is probably upset number 2. I have this guy before you have him, and that's Nikola Jokic. He's probably my second favorite player in the league from Doncic. Love Jokic. What he's doing this year for Denver is just ridiculous. When he wants to pass and get 13, 14 assists, he gets that. I mean, he's thrown up a couple 50-point games. Real old-school type center where he can just hammer you in the post, and you can't go small because the second you go small, it's over. Yeah. He's locked you down, turned around, and hit that little nice baby layup. And also the other thing I love about Jokic that I think puts him above Embiid is you go to Jokic in late game situations. He's probably, I know people don't quote-unquote quote him as a big, but he's probably the best since Dirk at late-game situations for a big guy like that. I know people sort of...
I consider him a big.
Yeah. I know people think Dirk and forward, but Dirk was a very large man.
Yes, he was.
And so I think since Dirk, Jokic has taken that mantle where he's one of those big guys where you don't have to take out in the last 2 minutes. You can run your offense through him, and he can hit you that last
He's not a liability.
Yeah, he's not. He'll hit you that last-minute shot. I haven't quite seen that from Joel Embiid, and that may be why I have him a little bit further down. That might be why the Sixers I don't trust as much, because you got Ben Simmons, who's not quite a scorer, and Joel Embiid, who I don't totally trust yet in those last 2 minutes to hit that shot. You're going with Tobias Harris probably there.
You still have to admit, though, he's had a really good season, and I think the team's success is largely based off what he's been putting out.
This season from Joel Embiid has been great, and I definitely, we might get into it at some point, an MVP conversation. I've been trying to avoid it because we're still 50 games away, but at some point we probably got to throw some names and maybe some odds on these guys and see what we got for MVP conversation. But Embiid's definitely on my list for that. Jokic would be as well, and might be my favorite, but the Nuggets haven't been winning. If they could avoid the Kings, that would be helpful too. All right, so we're into our top 5 now. At number 5, I have Kawhi Leonard, just a couple spots ahead from where you had him, and I do think at times he's probably a top 2-3 guy in the league, but we mentioned that the energy doesn't quite seem to be there as much as it did back when the Spurs days or that run with the Raptors. It's a little more sort of, we need it here in the third quarter. We got the lead in the fourth quarter. I'll pull back. We need it here in the second quarter. I'll sort of cruise. And it's a little bit LeBron James-like. He sort of, floats in and out of the game. But LeBron's a little bit more pass creative that way. So it's probably not quite as noticeable as when Kawhi pulls it.
And that's probably the only reason why I moved them, a few spots lower than you have. It's for that same reason. But at number 5, cracking into the top 5, I had to get a small guy in here. And just based off performance alone, I know that he doesn't have the weapons that he normally does. So a lot of it's put on his shoulders, and he seems to really relish and kind of embrace the opportunity. And he's putting up big numbers, and that's Steph Curry. And for all the same reasons you talked about earlier, but I really respect the fact that even with all the injuries on that team and all the issues that they're dealing with, he's really stepped up his game, and that's the reason why he cracked my top 5.
Yeah, we were almost right on with Steph Curry. You had him a couple spots higher, which I could very easily understand, especially the way he's played this year. Just been remarkable in watching that Warriors team. He's the reason to watch that Warriors team. All right, we're going into the top 5, and at number 4, I have Kevin Durant at number 4. Not quite top 3, and 3 or 4 years ago, he's probably number one,
Yeah.
especially when he was going head-to-head versus LeBron and winning those matchups. But I think I have a couple guys ahead of him here just because he did miss all of last year. And I do – that Nets team just worries me a little bit defensively. I see sometimes where they go Kevin Durant center, and while Kevin Durant can guard the rim, I'm not sure Kevin Durant wants to be playing center all that much.
I don't know if I'd want him to be guarding the rim.
But, the way he's popped back, it's still remarkable. So that's why I had to move him into my top 5 and not drop him too much off of where I had him, a couple of years ago. So Kevin Durant at number 4 for me.
And that's understandable and respectful. But at number 4, I went with your guy, Jokic.
Yes, I know. You had the Joker right there.
I just feel like he's been so impressive this season. I had to put him in the top 5. I know there's a lot of guys that, are having pretty good seasons that probably could have moved into the top 5, but I just feel like he's carrying that team. And, he does have help, but so much of it is on him that I just felt like he has to get in the top 5.
Yeah, especially with Murray, who's sort of gone back to his sort of mediocre regular season ways. Whatever happens to him in the playoffs really helps that team. But what he does in the regular season, it's not quite as outstanding and stunning. It is nice to watch Porter sort of grow. He's gotten a little cold, but I think that's to be expected. But, yeah, Joker has been just amazing. All right, so onward to number 3, and this is where I have Anthony Davis. I just have him below. Well, you could probably work out the next two. It wouldn't be too hard. But, Davis's defensive versatility rules the day for me. When you can put a guy like that out on the court, you can pretty much create a winner however you want because he can do whatever you want him to do.
Oh, there's no reason whatsoever why I would even argue with you having Davis there. As I stated earlier when I brought him up, one of my favorite players. The fact that he's a Laker also helps out a lot, but I see why you would have him there. At number 3, though, I actually have his teammate, the king himself, LeBron James. I know that he's definitely slowed down a bit as he's gotten a little more mature, we'll call it, but he's still one of the best players in the league. He can score almost at will without much effort. Same thing as we talked about earlier with Kawhi. He's a really good scorer. Super smart when it comes to a basketball IQ, and he can run that offense by himself. So I feel like regardless, until he retires, he's probably going to be a top 3 player for me.
Yeah, that might be an upset too. Me having LeBron James.
Yes, I know. Except the other way around.
Yes, I know. LeBron James, just ridiculous the way he can control games. He no longer really does it with pace and running that fast break all that much. I mean, they picked up the pace a little bit from definitely what it was a couple years ago, but LeBron just controls the game like really no one I've ever seen. He can just do things and make things happen just at his pace, at his will, and it's just remarkable the way he's aged too, and sort of gotten it the way he has. Hello? Hello?
Producers.
It's okay, Marys.
Did you get a light fall over?
No, she's just knocking over Patrick Mahomes. I don't know where it goes.
Okay, this way a little bit. More. There, that's good.
Okay.
All right, number 2.
Number 2? Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, we're at number 2, and I'm at LeBron James at number 2. So it wasn't too much of a difference there, but LeBron James number 2. I probably don't have to go on too much since I just went on for about 5 minutes about it.
Number 2, this is where I have your boy Luka. Again, one of the best players in the league right now. He's playing out of his mind, and I felt that it was almost unfair to keep him out of the top 5, which was a little surprising. The fact that you had him where you had him, I thought that you'd have him within your top spot.
Super number 1.
Yeah. Or, 0.005 or something. But, I really like what he's put up today. And you talked about him earlier. He's a super explosive player, and he's doing really well, which is why he's in my top 2.
Yeah, definitely. I probably did want to put him there, but I tried to be as objective as I could. All right, so One guy left. We could probably all guess who it probably is. Number one, I have Giannis Antetokounmpo. Probably just the most dominant player in the league. I don't know if he's officially a big, but
He plays like one.
a lot of those points come in the paint.
Yeah.
So I'm classifying him as a big. Now, did you leave Giannis off your list, or is he your number one?
Let me check. No, yeah, he's on there. He's number one. Obviously, the best player in the league right now for several different reasons. He's got youth on his side. He's got the offensive prowess where he can play inside, outside. He's got a defensive type of mindset where if he really wants to play defense, he'll lock just about anybody down. And we definitely expect some success from his team in the regular season and in the postseason.
Yeah, definitely.
So he pretty much checks all the boxes for both you and I. And it's no surprise that we both have him at number one.
Yeah. At number one, Giannis Antetokounmpo. That was our top 30. Be sure to follow us on greenlightnetwork.org and catch our NBA 7 on 7 every week on the Know It All podcast. We're also on Facebook at Greenlight Network, YouTube on Greenlight Network. Where can we find you, Achilles?
As always, you can find me on Instagram at TDAchilles_GLN. You can find me on Twitter at TDAchilles, and you can also find me on the Greenlight Network.
All right, and I'm GLNChamp5 both on Twitter and Instagram. That's our show, and we're out.